What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're walking through the draft talking about who I think the best pick is in every single round. For ADP here, I'm using FantasyPros consensus rankings. We're still a little bit too early to have accurate industry ADPs, and since ECR is basically going to drive ADPs once they come out anyways, I figure that's the best starting point for redraft. So sit back, hit the like button, and let's start things off in round one with Bijan Robinson. The most valuable player you can have in fantasy is a top 3 running back, and that is irrespective of the format you are playing in. If you can find a way, especially to hit on the #1 scoring running back in a season, you're just gonna have a strong team no matter how poorly the rest of your draft went. Like, unless you drafted like 2 through 6 rounds, just all complete bust. If you've got the #1 scoring running back, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna figure things out during the season and into the playoffs because you're probably gonna make the playoffs with the top running back. I really do think that Bijan just has the best chance to overtake McCaffrey this season. Had 1,463 yards, 8 touchdowns as a rookie last year, even only getting 18% of the team's carries from inside the 5-yard line, and having a poor catch rate because his quarterbacks were so trash. If he was, second among running backs in targets last season with 86, then you gotta think his floor and his ceiling for targets is absolutely insane, given that they're gonna run a ton more plays. They're going to gain a lot more yards. There's going to be greatly increased efficiency through the air, but they're also going to score more touchdowns, and they have the easiest schedule in the league this season. So he's going to get an amazing game script in the second half of games. Like, Bijan is just everything you want in a running back. Hits on talent as well. Easy pick this season. I think he's the most likely running back to unseat McCaffrey as that top running back. I think he could be the #1 pick in drafts next season. In round 2, best pick is Derrick Henry. And I know everyone wants to draft wide receivers early this season just because it worked last year. But Derrick Henry is probably a player who should be going in round 1, not in full PPR. So in standard and half PPR, he should probably be a first-round pick. I did have someone ask me the other day, they're like, Nick, I know you love Derrick Henry. I'm in a full PPR format. Do you like him as much? Well, no, of course not, right? Like, he's just not going to have a ton of receptions. It's possible to talk about his receptions in a second, but if you switch on over to full PPR, just the impact that it has, how much he's going to decrease compared to some of these other top running backs in the receiving game, it makes him much worse in round 2. Probably not someone you want to take in round 2. But in standard, in half PPR, where he's going in round 2, I think he's a phenomenal pick. Yes, he is 30 years old this season, but you know what he really needs to pay off? Let's say first round ADP. So let's just put it at the top and say, like, if he's a great pick in round 2, it's because he paid off a first round ADP. Again, you can get him 100% of the time in round 2, but if you had to pay off round 1, you're going to need about 16 half PPR points per game. If he hits that, he's definitely going to be worth where you're taking him. He has at least 18 receptions in 5 consecutive seasons, including 33 receptions 2 years ago, 28 receptions last season. So let's be ultra conservative, give him 18 receptions, his floor this season. If we do that, we throw in 1 receiving touchdown across the year. That is 1.9 points per game. So we're going to need 14.1 points per game on the ground for him to pay off first round value. Henry has at least 10 touchdowns in 6 consecutive seasons, all of which were on worse offenses than he'll be on this season. Over that time, he has averaged 0.9 rushing touchdowns per game. But let's again be super conservative. Let's say he has his worst season in touchdowns per game. That would be 0.7. That is 4.2 more points per game we can add on. He would need 99 rushing yards per game to return first round value. That would take him around 22 carries per week. But again, this is saying first round value. This is saying worst case scenario receiving. Worst case scenario for rushing touchdowns, he still needs about 22 carries per game. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I don't think he's going to have his worst season for touchdowns per game when he's in his best season for touchdowns. Everything is set up for him to have a spiked season for touchdowns this year. If we give him a better season for him, which would be 0.95 rushing touchdowns per game, would not be his best season. It would be a really good season for him. He's going to need 84 rushing yards per week. That's going to be closer to like 18 and a half, 19 carries. He's done that in 4 of the last 5 years. And again, that is to pay off first round value, which is not what he's going to cost you in drafts. We're not asking for anything crazy. He doesn't actually need 1,500 rushing yards, because if he had 1,500 rushing yards, it's probably to go along with 20 rushing touchdowns. We're not going to need that from him to pay off this ADP. If he's at 1,200 rushing yards, he's having a monster season for touchdowns. He's racking up a few receptions. He's going to be great. I really have no hesitations in drafting him this season. Last year, we didn't see any signs, if you look at the advanced metrics, no signs of a decline. So I'm personally not worried about it. Moving on to round 3. I think the best pick is Jalen Waddle. Waddle had a bit of a down year last season, but if you remove the game he left early with injury, you remove the games obviously he didn't play with injury, he was the wide receiver 19 in points per game, right behind Devonta Adams, right ahead of Pittman, Metcalf, Olave, and Devonta Smith. So he's been 21st, 13th, and 19th in points per game these first 3 years, only 3 years of his career, and he is a focal point of the Dolphins offense. That is not going to change. I also think there's some untapped potential with touchdowns. He is not someone who they feature in the red zone. And if Tyreek Hill stays healthy, if this ground game at least stays remotely healthy, right, unless they all get injured, that is probably going to continue. He's not someone that's really going to rack up a ton of targets in the red zone, but he certainly got unlucky last season, only scoring 4 times. He had 6, 8, and 4 touchdowns his first 3 seasons. I mean, Miami is going to score like 3.5 plus touchdowns per game. And so it's certainly possible that even if we don't see him featured in the red zone, if they score 3 to 4 touchdowns a week, he's probably going to have a lot of years, if we simulate a bunch of time, where he has more than 4 total touchdowns over the season. He could get lucky. He could score 10, 12 touchdowns. He's going to be a wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 1, if that ever happens. And that's basically my take on Waddle this season. I think it is super unlikely that he is going to bust. So especially if you take some risk in rounds 1 or 2 and you want to even it out with Jalen Waddle in round 3 and say, what are the odds he has a bad season? He's just such a lock to be a massive part of this offense that he'd need to get hurt. And again, anyone could get hurt, right? We shouldn't just expect Jalen Waddle to have a season-ending injury. So massive part of the offense. And if he gets lucky with touchdowns, or let's just say Tyreek Hill misses a month plus with any sort of injury, well, he's going to be a locked-in, probably top 3 wide receiver in those weeks. That makes him a very strong pick as a low-end wide receiver 2 in drafts. Best pick in round 4 is Devonta Smith. Right now, he's ranked 40th as a wide receiver 21. He's been the wide receiver 16 and 22 in points per game these last 2 years with A.J. Brown. So, another wide receiver that I think is just being drafted very close to his floor. Devonta Smith has increased his efficiency each year. And he's proven that, even an undersized wide receiver can dominate in today's NFL. He can run every route in the route tree. He can win against man coverage, zone coverage, and press coverage. That was the one thing coming into the league where people were like, well, at his size, can he really beat press? No, he's great against press coverage. He is objectively an elite wide receiver. The Eagles are likely to lean a little bit more pass heavy this season. And who knows, maybe the loss of Kelsey opens the door to a few more passing touchdowns because maybe they're just slightly less effective with the tush push and maybe they do it at a slightly lower rate. You lose one of the best centers of all time. It's just possible that they're a little bit less effective, makes them throw it and they close a little bit more. Maybe that does lead to a little bit higher touchdown ceiling for Devonta Smith. So I think the takeaways with Smith are basically the same as Waddle. You're getting extraordinarily talented wide receiver 2s on really good offenses that are going to have a very, very strong role this season. You can't take them in round 1 because they are the wide receiver 2 on their team, but both are being drafted very close to their floor. And with any sort of touchdown luck, any sort of injury from wide receiver 1, that's going to open up to them dominating their ADP. In round 5, I think the best pick is Malik Neighbors. And honestly, it is embarrassing that he's being ranked this low by the community. Currently the wide receiver 30, despite being the wide receiver 1 by a mile on his own team. Someone that, the offense is going to be centered around the season. Like Brian Daboll is in absolute love with Malik Neighbors. And I can promise you he's going to pepper him with targets. Like, not only is it clear that Neighbors was his call in drafting, and, others in the organization did want to go with the Dunze. So he's going to have something to prove, right? Whenever it's your call being like, hey, this is my flag plant. I want this guy. I want to set the offense around him. You're going to do everything in your power to get them the football, because you're going to look very, very bad if they're not able to utilize him, because also that's going to mean they stink. I mean, if they can't get Neighbors the ball, they don't really have a lot of other talent. Like, they don't have Saquon is gone. We know that Darren Waller is gone. Like, Hyatt, Wandale, Slayton, the corpse of Allen Robinson, Singletary, Tyrone Tracy. Like, that's what they're working with. So if they're not going to feature Neighbors, who are they featuring? It's really no one on this team. Neighbors could hit, a 25, 27% target share on this offense. That is not something you can say about pretty much every wide receiver going from his point on. He is an extraordinarily good pick this late in drafts. Round 6, best pick in my eyes is Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid had 73 receptions, 673 yards, and 2 touchdowns as a rookie. Might not seem like an amazing stat line, especially when you compare it to like Sam Laporta's rookie season, but Laporta had like the best season of all time, right? 73 receptions is still the 4th most of a rookie tight end ever. Like, had Laporta just not done that last year, we'd be looking at Kincaid being like, wow, this was the 3rd most ever, and we'd be a lot more excited about him. So, not only is it exciting to think about how Kincaid could just grow as a player in year 2, but think about the available targets on Buffalo. 317 available targets from last season. 55% of their target share is gone, and they've only replaced it with Keon Coleman, who you guys know I think is a little bit overrated. Curtis Samuel, who's good, but is not going to command 150 targets, right? Chase Claypool, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Mac Hollins. Like, you kidding me? Those guys are not going to command any sort of target share. I think Kincaid should be the favorite to lead this team in targets, and given that they've also lost over 55% of their red zone targets, that 2 touchdown total has a lot of room for growth as well. So the theme with today's video, just on par with that. Where are players having a very secure target share that have an incredible ceiling, especially at their position, when things go their way? Given what you need to do at tight end to finish as, a top 3 option, well within his range of outcomes, to be the number 1 scoring tight end. If he had 100 receptions this season, I would not be surprised at all, and that would have a good chance of being the tight end 1. Also, I think this is a season you probably want to go tight end early. I like some guys late. I'll mention them, in the final rounds, but I think this is kind of a year where you probably want like a top 7 or 8 tight end, because not all of them are going to hit, but some of them are. And I think Kincaid is just the best priced. Him and Andrews are probably the best priced tight ends, in my opinion. Round 7, I think Marquise Brown is the most mispriced player. He is the wide receiver 39, and there's really just no reason he should be going this late. And I don't think he'd be going this late had last season not occurred. The thing is, he didn't have a great stat line last season, but his quarterback play was terrible. Only 56% of his targets were even remotely possible to catch. 56% catchable target rate last season. You know what percent of Mahomes' targets were deemed catchable last year? 80%. In fact, no wide receiver in the NFL has lost more fantasy points per game due to uncatchable targets over the last 3 years than Marquise Brown. What team has the most catchable targets in the league last season? The Chiefs. This is the upgrade of all upgrades, and he's filling a role that the Chiefs have been looking to fill since they lost Tyreek Hill. They've been trying to filter players in and out of that role. No one's really hit. I think Hollywood is set up beautifully this season, and you can get him as your wide receiver 4. Sounds good to me. Great pick in round 7. Round 8, best pick, Jaylen Warren. Warren has been awesome in his first 2 seasons, averaging 5.1 yards per carry, catching 83% of his targets. This season, the Steelers will be running Arthur Smith's run-heavy scheme, which is one that, doesn't necessarily feature any one running back. We saw that last season with Bijan and Algier. Even with Bijan being, better in every single facet of the game, just across the board better at everything, Algier was still given 186 carries, including 43% of the team's red zone carries, plus the two basically split the carries from inside the 10. Last season, Najee nearly tripled Warren in carries inside the 20 and inside the 10-yard line. And so if that split is going to shrink a little bit under Arthur Smith, that's a big positive for Warren. The Steelers also have the hardest schedule in the NFL this season, which is not a good thing for running backs. We want them to have easy schedules, but an easy schedule would benefit Najee a little bit more because he's the one they're more likely to lean on late in games if they're winning. If they're losing, it's much more Warren time, right? Warren's going to be out there in like 2-minute drills and hurry up offense, which they're probably going to be in a lot this season. They have the hardest schedule in the league and they stink. Like, he was 5th in receptions last season. He could jump from there. He could jump up to like 2nd or 3rd in the league in targets and receptions for running backs. That makes him a very, very safe pick. One that also comes with league-winning upside. If anything happened to Najee, he is an instant must start in all formats. I don't care if you're an 8-team league, you're starting him if that happened. Best pick in round 9 in my eyes is Jaden Daniels. Daniels averaged 9.7 fantasy points per game on rushing alone in his college career. You pair that with Cliff Kingsbury, and that's going to give you an incredibly high floor and ceiling in fantasy. Cliff does get a lot of hate because he's honestly not that good of a coach in terms of like actually winning NFL games. But in terms of fantasy, we do really like him, right? The Commanders threw the ball at an extremely high rate last season, but they still only ranked 19th in plays per game because they played so slow when the game was close. It elevates plays when you throw it, and you would think with how much they threw it, how high of a rate they threw it, they'd have more plays. But if you're playing super slow, you can only have so many plays. Cliff Kingsbury is going to change that. He loves to go no huddle, and his offenses always are at the top of the league in terms of plays per game. So while we don't 100% know how good Daniels is going to be in the passing department, it doesn't really matter that much. Given how much he's going to run it, given how valuable rushing is for fantasy for quarterbacks, being able to have that on a team where they're going to run a ton of plays gives him an incredible floor and ceiling, especially near the double-digit rounds. In round 10, best pick is Rome Odunze, another one where it's just like astonishing that he's being ranked this lowly. He's the 47th wide receiver off boards right now, despite being arguably the second best wide receiver on just a stacked draft class, but either second or third best wide receiver. I understand the target competition is going to be high, playing alongside DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, but it also means he's never going to see double teams. He's never going to be the primary focus for opposing defenses, and thus he's going to have significant upside every week. I also think there's a very real chance that he is their best wide receiver this season. Maybe he doesn't go out there in week 1 and perform the best, but I think over the second half of the season, he could be their best wide receiver. And so getting a 7-round discount on him after DJ Moore is an unreal value, needs to be a top priority if the industry is going to rank him this low. In round 11, I think the best pick is Chase Brown. I know I've been a Zach Moss truther at times, but I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards Brown as time goes on. I just think that the upside is just too good to pass up on. Like, this is obviously going to be a prolific offense, right? And for as good as I think Moss can be, the reality is he's played 53 career games, right? He has over 90 rushing yards 3 times. He has 1 game north of 40 receiving yards. Like, I'm not saying that Chase Brown is a lock to be any better, but we know that he's more explosive, and he is someone that the team drafted, so we know they saw something in him. And you know how many third down snaps Chase Brown played last season? Like, he was pretty good in the receiving game. He didn't rack up a ton of receptions, but he had some receptions, especially, late in the season. He was getting like 2-3 receptions a game. So you're thinking, okay, he had a role in the air. 3. He played 3 third down snaps all of last season. That's crazy, right? But Zach Taylor has commented about how much growth he's made this offseason in the receiving game. That's a role that's up for grabs with Mixon gone. And like, Zach Moss has never been that good as a receiver. So if Brown's going to win that role while also maintain a change of pace, role on the ground with the upside to be their lead back, like, he could shatter his ADP. So I've been a little bit too low on him thus far. I'm going to start ranking him higher, drafting a little bit more from now on. Best 12th round pick is Blake Corum. I am still a believer that Kyren is a very strong pick in the early rounds, just because it is his job to lose. But it is undeniable the upside that Corum has this season. He's going to step right in week one and have a role. Like in week one, we look at a lot of these rookie running backs. Many of them are going to start off slower and then be eased into roles. Corum in week one will have a role on this offense. It'll be a role mostly to keep Kyren healthy, but they're going to use these two interchangeably and just, keep Kyren healthy. That gets him on the field. That gets him in a situation where maybe he just starts out producing Kyren and they kind of go to a 50-50 split earlier than we think. But it also means if Kyren misses any time, we have a locked and loaded running back one in those weeks. That is upside you look for in the later rounds. Many times we have these backups and we're like, ooh, if the starter goes down, they'll be good, but they're good in that there'll be like a playable running back two. Corum will be a locked and loaded running back one in any weeks Kyren misses. That's elite upside to stash on your bench, especially given Kyren's history with foot injuries. Best 13th round pick in my eyes is Marshawn Lloyd. My model actually projects Lloyd as the number one running back in this draft class, at least in terms of fantasy potential, because that's what it cares about, right? It doesn't care about your actual impact in an NFL game. It cares about your fantasy potential. He is just an incredibly explosive running back, and that's going to lead to him being a little bit boom bust at times. But when you look at the landing spot, it's really scary. Like the Packers offense is going to be one of the best in the league this season. They are going to be one of the highest scoring teams. Like they are going to be unstoppable at times. No one's going to be able to stack the box against them because you really have to respect that passing attack. And so when Lloyd sees the field, he's going to have plenty of lanes to burst through. Again, being an explosive player, he doesn't need as many carries as like an early down grinder would have. He also offers kind of a different skill set than Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is more of that bruiser. Jacobs does want to be involved in receiving a little bit more, and we'll see how that kind of shakes out, because that's basically going to be the difference between, Lloyd breaking out and Jacobs being like a true league winner. Like that kind of differentiator is just going to come down to what happens on third downs, what happens in 2-minute drill. Do they keep Jacobs or do they go with Lloyd? I don't 100% know what's going to happen. And honestly, I think Jacobs is a phenomenal pick because he has the upside to be a top 5 running back if things kind of shift his way. Because I also think he's going to be the guy they use to like close games. He's going to be their goal line back. So I think he has a lot of upside. But we know Lloyd is a lot more explosive. And if they want to go to kind of a split and have someone in that like Aaron Jones role, realistically, Lloyd kind of fits the Jones role a little bit more. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to happen, but if we're in round 13 and we're trying to think about what players have upside, Lloyd has significant upside because, even without an injury to Jacobs, if he has the Aaron Jones role, that's incredibly valuable. If you have a Jacobs injury now, given how poorly we've seen A.J. Dillon play, how they have no one behind that, Lloyd would also be a must start every week. With an injury, again, those are the running backs you go after in later rounds. So after this point, after round 13, honestly, rounds don't matter that much. Like, get your guys, right? Don't worry too much about reaching, especially if you only have like 16 or 17 picks. You're going to draft a defense and a kicker. You don't have that many picks after this anyway, so get your guys. I would say my favorite late round players at each position are at quarterback, Geno, Will Levis, Drake May. At running back, Jalen Wright, Tank Bigsby, Braylon Allen, and Tyron Tracy Jr., but Tyron Tracy more in full PPR. At wide receiver, Dontavian Wicks, Ricky Pearsall, Douglas, Jermaine Burton, and Demarcus Robinson. And then at tight end, it would be Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. But again, like I said earlier, I would probably try and get like a top 7 or 8 tight end this season. They're pretty affordable, and I'm thinking a few of them are going to be really, really good in fantasy. So if you watched this far, be sure to hit the like button. You definitely liked it to some degree. And let me know what picks you agreed with or disagreed with in the comment section down below. Tomorrow, I'm going to go over the worst pick in every round. But that, my friends, is into this one, and thanks for watching.